Story 1. My dad said he could lift a car with 10 people in it. He also said that he was secretly the Hulk but never transformed because he was really good at controlling his anger. I remember the next day bragging about it to kids in my class and debating with them all day about how it was true and my dad would not lie. Story 2. Mr. Yuck lives in the cabinet under the kitchen sink, and if we ever opened the cabinet, he would eat us. I was terrified of that cabinet for years. Eventually, I realized the household cleaners were all kept under the sink, hence Mr. Yuck, to keep us away and safe. Edit. I had no idea it was a known campaign with a commercial and stickers. I just assumed my parents made it up themselves. It is surprising what Reddit comments can teach you. Story 3. My mom told me when I was maybe 9 that she would just know when I lost my virginity, and it made me paranoid about her being able to sense things about me without me telling her. Story 4. My dad was named after my grandmother's brother who had died shortly before he was born. I was always told this, and it seemed perfectly harmless. Later in life, I learned that my grandmother had a mental breakdown and believed my dad was her brother reincarnated. She not only gave him the same name but also dressed him in his clothes and referred to him as her brother. In fact, her nickname for him my whole life was brother. It affected me deeply, and I never really saw my grandmother or my dad the same way again. I had much more sympathy for my dad and some of his oddness. Being raised that way can lead to being a little unusual. Story 5. Not my parent but my older brother said he saw the Easter Bunny come in to drop off the baskets. He described him as a 7-foot rabbit who walked upright on 2 feet, and his fur was purple. Each step he took made no sound. Terrified me. Story 6. I had a bad habit of chewing on my nails when I was in the 6th grade. My mother told me a story about a girl who chewed on her nails and accidentally swallowed a small piece. The nail continued to grow in her stomach until it poked through and cut her open from the inside, and she had to have surgery. I never chewed on my nails after that. Story 7. When you hear the music playing on the ice cream truck, that means they are all out of ice cream. Damn you, Mom. Story 8. If you vacuum over the cord to the vacuum, you will be electrocuted and the house will catch fire. Vacuuming low-key scares me. Story 9. After my parents separated, my mother came to visit. We visited her at our uncle's house, and at one point, my father went out to buy cigarettes and did not return. For more than 20 years, I believed my father had abandoned us and never looked for us. It turns out our mother took us without permission, and when our father returned, our uncle met him at the door with a shotgun and told him to leave. Story 10. When I was 5, I had several cavities that needed to be filled. Our family dentist allowed my mother to come back in the room with me, but then she said she had to go get a magazine and left. She did not come back. I am still mad at my mother for that. May she rest in peace. I have not forgotten it 63 years later. Story 11. Halloween is evil. I missed out on Halloween for most of my life because people are so close-minded. But thanks to them, I have a permanent Halloween fixation. Story 12. Good girls don't want to marry, and then she would list whatever the current issue was to try to make me behave. Good girls don't want to marry guys who spend all their money on bicycles, who don't put dishes in the dishwasher, who don't have a career plan by age 16, who don't go to church, who talk to girls at the park, who don't shower before every meal, who quit jobs for better jobs, and so on. She was a very Christian woman trying to raise me right from a young age. I think I was 11 when the good girl guilt started. I grew up really insecure, convinced I was unlovable and that any girl I liked would never like me back. Looking back, she had points. Personal hygiene is important, but to tell your son he's unlovable because he came in for lunch after working all day in the hot summer garden and stunk is wrong. It's important to learn how to coexist with a woman in the same home, but telling him he'll never get married if he doesn't perfectly follow her changing kitchen rules is unkind. It's important to teach fidelity, but shaming a boy for talking to classmates is harmful. Story 13. I was apparently not good at drying off after showers as a child. My mother told me that not drying between my toes could lead to gangrene. She just wanted me to dry off more thoroughly, but I was terrified of my toes getting infected and falling off for many years. Story 14. We beat you because we love you. I used to hide my black and blue bruises under my school uniform at 8 years old. Perfect. Trauma and affection in one neat package. What a combination. Story 15. Knowing my dad drowned when I was a child was difficult. Hearing that he was murdered as an adult was very rough. I wish you had kept that to yourself. Story 16. If my mother had gone out for the day and I was looking for her around the house, my father used to tell me she had had enough of us and gone to America to live with her brother. It really troubled me. Story 17. My grandmother went blind around the time I was born. My father used to tell me it was because she looked at me. Story 18. When I was about 5 or 6, I remember my parents talking, and my mom said, "Why don't you go with your girlfriend?" I thought this was funny, so I turned to my dad, laughed and said, "Yeah, go with your girlfriend." When I was 11 or 12, my dad told me he cheated on my mom when I was 2. The woman became pregnant, and it turns out I have a half-brother. I forgot to add that when my mom was feeling jealous or angry, she would tell my dad to go with his girlfriend, meaning the woman he cheated on my mom with. Story 19. Here's a fun one. When I came of age, my mom sat me down to tell me that she could ovulate on demand like a goat. She was studied by doctors and it was genetic, so I probably could too. I just learned that goats don't even ovulate on demand. One way of scaring kids into safe sex, I guess. Story 20. It was illegal to turn on the overhead light in the car at night while driving. To this day, I get anxious when someone turns it on. My mom insists she never told me that. Story 21. My mother told me that eating until you feel very full stretches your stomach out, which is why you get that feeling. She said that if you kept doing that, you would get fatter as you continued to stretch your stomach. I was terrified to even feel slightly full as a child and ate very small meals. I ended up severely anorexic. I am almost 38 and still have an unhealthy relationship with food. Story 22. Girls only hit you because they like you. Also, do not react when bullies pick on you. They are only looking for a reaction. Story 23. My grandpa made jokes about my grandma taking a ride on her broom, which led to impressionable young me being accused of witchcraft and almost being expelled from private school because I believed him. Story 24. We love you all the same, but they will only watch me and get confused if I cry. When my younger brother cries, my mom hugs and defends him. Story 25. My mom decided I was allergic to milk, but I was not. Long story short, I lived with this misconception my entire childhood. Saying it was a lie may be strong, but it was definitely untrue. Story 26. I would ask my father when I was young, "Dad, what day is it?" He would say the day as long as it did not rain. When I went to school and it rained, I would tell the kids and the teachers, "Oops, it is the next day now." For example, it is Monday, but if it rains now, it is Tuesday. Story 27. When I was 6, my father told me that extraterrestrials came down to Earth using meteor showers as cover, so they are not noticed on radar. I lived in the suburbs of Arizona, which has many cloudless skies and dark sky initiatives, laws designed to reduce light pollution. You basically cannot avoid seeing meteor showers when they are happening, which is quite regular. That is the start of my insomnia. Story 28. I thought my father was the man who died when I was 3. I found out at 32 that my real father is alive and well, and I have 7 brothers and sisters. Story 29. My mum, who is not originally from Australia, told me everything was venomous, which made me terrified of the beach, such as stonefish, snails in the garden, slugs, and so on. She also told me some German myths that really scared me, like being terrified of being near the Christmas tree on Christmas Eve, completely petrified. Basically, German children's stories in general. I am over it all now, but it affected me as a kid. Story 30. My dad swore the car's dome light was illegal while driving, so I would sit in the dark fumbling for snacks until I got my own license and realized nobody cares. Story 31. My mom said that she lost 2 of her cousins to drowning at the beach to prevent my brothers and me from going near pools or the sea. To this day, I cannot swim because I missed the chance in my youth. Story 32. My parents told me that the reason they had me was because my brother wanted a little sister. If that was the whole story, it would be cute. But the truth is that first he wanted a dog and later wanted a sister as well. When my parents made him choose because he couldn't have both, he chose a sister. They tried to play it off as me being a late Christmas gift for my brother. I have no idea how they thought that was a cute or funny story. It made me feel like an object for my entire childhood. My birth was a selfish wish of a person who later wasn't even there for me. Since then, I have heard some retellings of this story from my mom. She tried to clarify that I wasn't a gift, that they genuinely wanted me but waited for my brother to accept my dad as his new dad, and so on. I don't believe them, or maybe I just don't know what to believe. Even if they actually wanted me, it doesn't change that this so-called funny story damaged my view of my existence. Story 33. My dad told me two incorrect things about my teeth. Flossing should take at least 5 minutes. If you aren't going to spend that long, don't bother. As a result, I never flossed. Multiple dental hygienists and dentists have confirmed that this is not true. Flossing is pretty quick. It took me years to develop the habit of flossing. You don't need to brush the biting surfaces of your teeth. Just clean the rest thoroughly, and they'll be fine. Guess where I got my only cavity and needed cavity monitoring? I now brush the biting surfaces. Story 34. It didn't bother me. It was just funny, and I still think about it today. One day, my dad's car was broken, and I asked him what happened. He said, "Do you see how the clouds are today? Every time they look like this, the cars won't work." For a moment, I didn't consider the other cars coming and going on the street in front of our house. My dad was funny and creative. God rest his soul. I don't know if I'll be able to describe the clouds, but it is when they are all fluffy, covering the whole sky, looking like a field of clouds. Story 35. Not my parents as much as my baby boomer siblings. College is a waste of time and money. You are just burdening the family by not going out and getting a job right after high school. My parents did not discourage me from going, but they were not enthusiastic or supportive about it either. I went anyway. Story 36. Santa was always watching and knew if you were naughty or nice. My parents really emphasized this, especially around chores or homework. Story 37. We were having a bonfire in the garden, and there was a high-pitched squealing noise. Dad told me it was the snails caught in the fire. There was some paint on the wood, and that was the noise. I believed him for years. Story 38. Still pretty mad. Mom used to say it was illegal for any lights to be on inside the car while moving. Now some cars come equipped with disco parties, such as Starlight and giant touchscreens. Story 39. My parents would daily inform me that they were going to take me back to the hospital and exchange me for a better child. But do not worry, it was just a joke and did not cause any lasting damage. Story 40. The police could come and take me to juvenile detention for any household offense. Messy room, not doing dishes, not watering plants. Mom would hop on the phone and ask for the chief, so I would scramble to get the work done. When I got older and realized she was not truthful, she actually called the police to report that I was using drugs. The police correctly dismissed her report. Story 41. I was caught practicing kissing a girl with a boy, and my parents told me it was not okay to kiss a boy. They did not say or else, but it felt like they did. That moment made me realize that some actions can cause people to leave me behind, alone. It made me terrified of failure, which transformed into hating myself every time I made a mistake. Failure is necessary to learn, and I learned a lot. I hated myself a lot, so I became very quiet and shy because the less I spoke, the less chance I had to fail. I am still a very anxious person and have only recently stopped hating myself, but I still struggle with blaming myself for everything and ruminating. It was my comfort zone for so long that sometimes I have to fight it back, and it gets exhausting. Story 42. My whole childhood, my dad was on a 50-year plan, meaning he thought he was going to die at 50. Every birthday of his, I was very stressed. Story 43. You can achieve anything if you work hard enough. However, factors such as luck, opportunity, good physical health, and mental health also play important roles. Story 44. I was with my mother, and we were visiting her sister after she had her first child. I was a child and remember going into town and seeing photographs of people in masks taped to a cafe window. One caught my eye because it looked real with blended, matching skin tones. It was one of those cartoonish old man masks. My mother said these were the people who kept making faces and rolling their eyes. Their faces got stuck like the person with the realistic-looking mask. I was 7, and it gave me nightmares for the rest of the trip. Story 45. My dad told me that if you get a tapeworm, they make you take laxatives so strong that you pass your intestines. Story 46. Never tell a man no. Anytime I told my father no, he would beat me severely. He made sure to only beat me where the bruises were not visible to others. Story 47. One day, I walked home drunk from a friend's house and couldn't manage to unlock the door. I started vomiting and passed out on the porch. For years, she told me she found me on the porch with a birthday cake on my lap. Later in life, she admitted she made that last part up. For years, I avoided a couple of stores on the route home because I was scared I had stolen a cake. Story 48. You can grow up to be President of the United States. Sorry, Mom. I'm not interested in children, so I guess I'm not qualified. Story 49. They used to refer to the brother I would have had if he had not misbehaved so much. I figured it out about the same time I solved the Santa conspiracy. They still laugh about it. Story 50. My mother told me it was illegal to change lanes on bridges because she hates bridges. I believed her until I was 28. There are 3 truths in life: death, taxes, and the belief that it is illegal to change lanes on a bridge. Imagine my surprise when I learned it was all a lie. Now, whenever I see a tall bridge, I think of my mother. Story 51. This was my grandmother, not my parents, but egg whites give you warts. It took me about 10 years to realize that was rubbish, but by then it was so ingrained I still feel uncomfortable when I get egg white on my hands. Story 52. I do not know, but I have a friend who convinced her children that beans were bird droppings, and now they will not eat beans. I have no idea why she did that. It was a very unwise decision. Story 53. I loved strawberries as a child. My mother would tell me that the strawberry police would come to get me every time I ate one. Story 54. They told me my tortoise, which I loved since I was 5 years old, was taken by a man who collected reptiles. They sold her while I was sleeping and made me believe that a man had stolen her from my garden. Story 55. My parents told me that nacho cheese and fries would give me cancer. They ate them anyway because they were old and expected to die soon. Turns out they wanted my cheese and fries. Story 56. I was terrified of the monster under the bed and in my closet when I was a kid. One night, in desperation, my mom took a toy wand from my dress-up box and said it was a monster detector that would beep loudly if it found one. It helped me sleep when she waved it around and it did not beep. However, I had a genuine fear of loud noises, especially fire alarms at school, until high school. My poor mom. Story 57. If I plucked my nipple hairs, I would get breast cancer. I was a fuzzy girl and was terrified of getting my grandmother's breast cancer, but I was bullied by all my boyfriends. Story 58. My hamster died of old age. She mentioned a couple of years ago that it was actually the cat, and my heart broke. Story 59. If you swore to do something, you were making a promise to God, so you could never break a swear. I took it very seriously, especially when I had to swear in court because I was convinced God would physically force me to do whatever I said I would if I didn't do it on my own. I found out later my parents are atheists. They just wanted an easy way to tell if I was lying or not. Story 60. Watched the news with my dad. The newsreader made a mistake. I asked my dad, what happens to the newsreader now that he's made a mistake? Afterwards, my dad said they will take him out the back and shoot him. I was about 7 years old. I thought it was very harsh but accepted it. Story 61. On a hike, my dad once told me if I fell behind, a bear was going to snatch me up, and no one in the group would see it happen. I also applied what my dad said to stranger danger, so anytime my family was out, I always made sure I was in the front where I could be seen. The funny thing was my parents started getting irritated with me running in front of them all the time and told me to stop. But of course I didn't because I knew they would be sad if I got snatched by a bear or stranger. Story 62. My mom told me that I was not allowed to play by the local river because it had snakes in it. It worked. I never dared to play there, but the days when mom and dad went swimming were the worst. I remember crying once because I was worried sick that mom and dad would get eaten by the snakes. Story 63. I do not know about harmless, but my mom told us that if we touched something in a store, a puppy would die. We did not touch anything. Story 64. The first 10 years of my life, my dad kept trying to convince me he was going to sell me to someone as punishment. It came to a head when he held me over a ledge at the Sioux Locks and yelled, "You guys need a deckhand?" at a passing freighter. This was shortly before my parents' divorce. My dad also told me that the Chinese would force me into slave labor making shoes. I was terrified of the first Asian man I ever met in public. Now I have a strong attraction to Asian women. My head feels really messed up. Story 65. My dad always told me, "I am the adult, so I am right. You are the child, so you are wrong." It is a great way to teach a child not to trust themselves and to blindly trust adults. Story 66. My dad always told me I had an older brother named Bill who had misbehaved and ended up buried in the backyard. Only much later did I realize just how disturbing that is, especially in the context of the very real people who experienced something similar. Story 67. My grandparents would tell us that the silos were filled with bad children when we drove by. They would tell us to be quiet so we could hear them crying. Story 68. We went on vacation, and when we came back, all of my bottles had been stolen. None in the fridge, none in the cabinet, all gone. Everything else was fine though. Just some random person who broke in to take my bottles. But it is okay, you had to stop using them soon anyway. I was convinced the burglars were coming back. Maybe they were still in the house and living in our attic. 35 years later, I am still terrified of home invasion. Story 69. It was not my parent, but a teacher. She told me that crows and starlings like shiny things and that if your eye catches the sun just right, they will peck them out. This gave me a fear of birds. Story 70. I couldn't move out because they would lose the house, and I needed to help pay the bills. Turns out my mom just wanted to buy gifts for the kids at her church every month. She also convinced me that I was too overweight to pursue a career in entertainment. Story 71. I was not told any white lies that I remember, but my children are going to be very upset when they learn that mothers and fathers cannot see their children's ears turn red when they lie. My children both cover their ears, either in obvious ways or more inconspicuously now that the oldest is 10, when they lie so we do not see their ears turn red. Story 72. That it is lonely at the top. I missed out on years of fun and experiences because I thought everyone was out to get me or that I needed to spend all my time improving myself alone. Story 73. Liking girls made me a weirdo basically. It affected me in a significant way for a while. I did not even mention the girls I was seeing as a teenager. Story 74. They would make up names for certain fruits and teach them to us as their real names. It was their little inside joke that they made me and my sister a part of, without telling us it was a joke. Imagine the looks I got at school when I saw a friend eating a peach and said, "I like Kiki roast too." Story 75. My parents were neglectful and focused on their own problems. I was a bystander to their chaos and development. When they joked that they used to hide quarters and give me one at a time so they wouldn't have to check on me at Chuck E. Cheese, it kind of hurt. I told my own kids that the ice cream truck plays music because they are out of ice cream instead of disappointing them. But I am also a better parent than my parents. Story 76. There is a television broadcast tower on the hill where I grew up, which has a red light at night for aircraft visibility. My parents told us the light was the devil watching us at night to see if we misbehaved. Story 77. Prayer changes things. Yeah, right. I guess now I've learned it's not so harmless. And I'm much more than low-key messed up. Oh well. Story 78. She found my brother and me under a rock. I asked where we came from. I believed it for a long time as a kid. Story 79. My father was busy with work all the time, so he couldn't spend much time with me. He also didn't live with us because he fought a lot with my mother, but they are still together as a couple. It turns out my dad had a wife and 3 children, and I am a son from an affair between him and my mother that has been going on for 30 years. It took me 18 years to figure it out on my own. It was difficult growing up without a proper father figure, but it wasn't all that bad. My mother taught me how to be a man, and my brother is my hero. While my father wasn't around all the time, he paid for everything. Our apartment, our bills, my private school, college, my car, our healthcare, everything I needed and asked for. Story 80. Well, I was told not just by my parents but others that if I did not drink milk and had a limited liking for dairy products, I would not grow properly, would have fractures, and would watch all my teeth fall out. I am 5 feet 3 inches tall, have not required much dental work, and yes, I have had some broken bones, but they did not break from minor impact and eventually healed. Story 81. My mom was teaching us the bones in the arm when we were just learning arm. We were quizzed on it in a fun way. I asked what the place you urinate is called. She said it was myself. I think I was a teenager when a friend corrected me. All those years I said, myself hurts. If I got a urinary tract infection from swimming or a reaction to different soaps. I truly believed my vagina was called self. I told her that was quite clever. She said she made it up as she went and never intended for me to believe it indefinitely. Story 82. When they say God will punish you for doing that, every time I do something wrong, I thought God was someone who has a lot of anger towards people and likes to punish. Story 83. If we misbehaved, the police would arrest my mother for being a bad parent. When we started growing out of believing that, my mother changed the story to say she wanted us to misbehave so she could have a vacation in jail. Story 84. First, there is a Santa Claus. Then, there is no Santa Claus. Now I have visions of Santa in the weirdest places. I keep thinking I am about to get over it, and then they start showing up again. Story 85. I guess it was a gentle way to start explaining death to a child, but my grandmother died by suicide and my mother told me she died from keeping too many secrets and telling too many lies. That is a bit heavy to lay on a 5-year-old child. I think I would have preferred the truth, that she was an alcoholic and a drug addict. Story 86. Our dog went away after my parents got divorced. They always told me that he was far away and hard to visit. One day, my grandmother and I were walking in a neighborhood across from ours, and she pointed at a house, saying it was sad to see the dog die there. Apparently, my parents lied about it because they did not want us to be sad, but all it did was make me feel more betrayed. Story 87. My mom was terrified of spiders on another level. She said they were evil. I had seen her throw things, scream, and run trying to get away from a spider the size of a fingernail. She actually threw me at a spider once. My stepdad at the time had invited some friends over, not knowing one was bringing his new large tarantula. They were all sitting at a round table getting ready to play Dungeons and Dragons, and I was standing beside my mom with a Capri Sun. I'm not sure if the friend didn't know about my fear or didn't care, but he brought the spider out and set it on the table saying, "Look at this new pretty girl I got." Today, I was probably 6 or 7. The spider zoomed straight at my mom, and I felt her pointy nails on the back of my head, forcing me in front of her. At the time, I wasn't too happy to be around spiders either. Mom was afraid of them, so there had to be something wrong with it. She pretty much threw me across the table, almost squishing the poor little lady. I don't know if she knows, but I still haven't forgotten or forgiven her for that. Story 88. That pushing the hazard button in cars would eject the passenger out of the car. That tapioca was fish eyes. I had a really embarrassing conversation about bubble tea with my Chinese roommate in college. I am from the backwoods, and my aunt was known exclusively by her nickname, which is also a racial slur for Chinese people. I did not learn this until I said it in front of my roommate. We had many embarrassing conversations, but thankfully she was very kind and understanding. Story 89. When my pets died, they went to live in Winter Hut. It was a book we had, and my mom liked it. I literally believed that as each of my pets disappeared over the years, they were going off to live together in a little cottage in the woods. I was much older when I realized what it actually meant and ended up grieving every single pet I ever had all at once. It also made me wonder what other things my parents told me over the years that I believed but were just not true. Story 90. When I was a child, I was very picky with food and did not want to finish what I had on my plate. In front of the kitchen, there was a picture of a white horse hanging that terrified me. My mother always told me that if I did not finish everything, she would let the horse get off the picture. Thanks, Mom, very creative. Story 91. In Germany, there is the Struwwelpeter book. Our parents and grandparents read it to us when we were around for 5 or 6 years old. We had the original and censored version. The Daumenlutscher put his thumb in his mouth until he was warned the tailor would come and cut it off. He continued, and the tailor came with a huge pair of scissors and cut it off. That's how my little sister stopped sucking her thumb. The Hans Guck in die Luft always watched the birds in the sky while walking until he fell off a cliff and died. That's how I stopped staring at the sky. I loved to do this as a small child. Then there was the kid who played with fire and burned himself into a pile of ash. I was terrified of matches until I was maybe 9 or 10. The Sepenkasper denied eating his soup until he died from starvation. That's how my grandmother always made me eat even if I wasn't hungry anymore. That's how I got fat as a kid, which was then my fault. All in all, I give it an 8 out of 10. Quite effective. This was in the early 1990s in post-Soviet Eastern Germany, by the way. Story 92. My mom said that all the little black spots you saw in the road, such as oil spots and tar spots, were all kids who got run over from running into the road without their parents. I grew up thinking that getting run over by a car was a far more common occurrence than it really is. Story 93. When I was 13, my cat went missing. She had been gone for about a month, and while driving home one day, my mom saw a dead cat in the road and gasped. She sent my stepdad to go check. When I saw him walk back through my window, he was carrying a lifeless black cat. I broke down sobbing. My mom came in and reassured me that it was not my cat, that it had no white on it. My cat had a small white patch on her belly. She said my stepdad was just burying this cat out of respect. She told me that every now and then she would see my cat in the backyard. She had just moved out to live with the deer. To be fair, I had spotted a black cat in our yard occasionally after her passing, but could you really tell who a black cat is from that far away? When I was 21, I asked my mom if I could dig up the random cat. Morbid, I know, because I really wanted a cat skull to display. She finally informed me that it was, indeed, my cat, and she had lied to protect me. Mind you, my dad had died less than a year before that, and she took me to see his last breaths in hospice without informing me that he was comatose and death-rattling. I had no clue I was about to watch a person die. Where was the protection then? Story 94. That she loved my sister and me equally. Every subsequent action she has taken to this day has proved otherwise. Actions speak louder than words, Ma. I cannot be your housemaid, therapist, and the pillow you scream into at the slightest inconvenience while simultaneously being ignored emotionally and having my feelings and concerns disregarded when making life-changing decisions. Story 95. Witches lived in the creepy house up the road and turned children who misbehaved into snails. A boy named Carl walked into the river while the tide was out, got stuck in the mud, and drowned. That is why seagulls shout Carl. They are looking for him. The cage man from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang lives in the other creepy house up the road. When we were naughty, we were taken there, and he would feed us worms. Story 96. Don't be out late. There are copper thieves in the woods. We lived in an industrial area with some smaller forested areas around our house. I am terrified to be alone in dark places and still jump when I hear noise at night. I cannot sleep in darkness without plush toys, a person, and lights. I just get very anxious and panic. Story 97. Somebody once told me if I kept messing with the water dispenser on the refrigerator, it would blow up the whole house, killing everyone inside. I mean, it worked, but who tells a kid that? Story 98. From my mom. Question everything. Question everyone, including and especially your parents and teachers. Public service announcement. Teachers, my father, and managers do not appreciate this. You may be right, but they do not like that you are right. Story 99. You know those small silver balls used to decorate cakes? Well, I ate one from a birthday cake. A friend's mom said, "Ah, you will die in 1 year's time." I cried. I was 7. Story 100. We had an old spinning wheel in our formal dining room when I was little. My mom was afraid I would pinch my fingers if I played with it, so she told me that was where my grand uncle's amputated fingers had fallen off. I believed that until his funeral when I was 11 or 12, where I learned he lost his fingers in a log splitter while making firewood. I have no idea why my mom felt it necessary to lie about that. It didn't stop me from playing with the spinning wheel anyway. Story 101. My mom told me I was part black to prevent me from growing up with racist beliefs. I have red hair, and I faced a lot of pushback at school because of sharing that information. Despite that, I was confident. Story 102. Not exactly a lie, but my father once said something that unintentionally upset me. When I was a kid, sometimes my toenails would grow into my skin and cause an infection. My parents would take me to the local health center where a doctor removed the nail and prescribed antibiotics. This happened 3 or 4 times, and it was always painful. When I was around 8 years old, I got another one. But this time I didn't tell my parents because I didn't want to go through that painful process again. A few days later, the topic came up one night, and my dad casually mentioned that people who got infections and didn't treat them properly would get gangrene and eventually die. I didn't say anything. I just went to bed and cried in secret, thinking it was too late for me. I was too ashamed to admit I had hidden it from my parents and believed the infection had already advanced beyond cure. So I accepted that I would die in the following days. Every day for the next couple of months, I could think of nothing else, still believing my death was imminent and inevitable, even though my toe healed on its own. Eventually, I forgot about it, but it obviously affected me, and I feel it forever shaped my psyche in a negative way. Parents, please be clear when talking to your kids and make sure they feel they can talk to you about anything without judgment. Story 103. My great-grandmother was just on vacation, but she actually died on my sister's birthday. I never got to go to the funeral or say goodbye. Story 104. That demons can enter your body whenever. They took me to exorcisms, and I could not sleep at night because I was afraid it would come into me and I was going to be possessed. That was traumatic. Story 105. That raw cheese would make me sick. I have always been a cheese enthusiast, but I still feel very guilty when I taste some before adding it to whatever dish I am making. I should discuss this in therapy. Story 106. When I was 23, my mom told me that my dad wanted her to have an abortion because she only had daughters. I later found out from my dad and aunts that the truth was my grandpa made one comment about having another granddaughter. Literally, that was it. This was in the 1970s when ultrasounds were not common, so they were happy to have a boy instead. It was just another one of my mom's lies about my dad and his family. Story 107. Well, it did not mess me up, but my mother used to make me believe I was allergic to sand, so I would stay away from the playground sandbox. She just hated having to clean me up after I played in it. I am a mother myself now, and when my firstborn was playing in the sand, I found out I was not actually allergic. I know I felt so stupid when I found out, but I was very gullible when it came to everything my mother told me. Story 108. That my extremely unlikely birth happened for some extraordinary reason, that the world needed me and my spirit chose to be born to fulfill that. Story 109. My parents joked about me not being allowed to date until I was 16, which I took very seriously. I ended up hiding my crushes and middle school boyfriend until I was 13. When they found out, they asked me why I hid it from them, and I explained that it was because of what they always told me growing up. They couldn't believe I took them seriously and felt pretty bad. When I needed them during the difficult hormonal changes of puberty and middle school, I was scared to talk to them. Story 110. My parents told me Jewish people do not own dogs and let me and my brother assume it was some kind of strict religious rule so we would not keep asking for one. Even after I realized that was not true, I still avoided dogs and did not get one until I was in my 40s. At that point, I realized that dogs are the greatest thing ever and that I had wasted many years not having one in my life. I do not know if that counts as being messed up, but it definitely makes me sad because I missed out on a lot of wonderful years with dogs. Story 111. If I go too far from home, a large bald man might throw me into the back of his van and kidnap me. I do not trust bald men. Story 112. They exaggerated the risk of touching metal and avoiding water during thunderstorms. like to the maximum. When I was young, I used to build forts in the center of the house because I was always scared of thunderstorms. I still am. I just got caught in the middle of a fast-moving severe storm and ran into the shopping cart shelter trying to get to my car. I was very worried and still avoided windows. My mom and sister told me that if I shaved my upper legs and cut myself, I would die. If we stayed awake past 8 p.m., we would turn into a pumpkin. We had the perfect lamp and light in the living room that made our skin look orange. Story 113. Not a parent, but my grandfather told me when I was a kid that if I swallowed any toothpaste while brushing my teeth, teeth would grow in my stomach and eat me from the inside out. I am 29, and I still cannot eat anything mint-flavored because it makes me nauseous. Story 114. To keep us close, my aunt used to tell us about the man, not a code word for the government, but a shadowy shapeshifter who could be anyone at any time. He would change shape into a stranger and try to lure children away, and do God knows what with them. His original form was that of the man typically depicted on neighborhood watch signs. Our local versions of the sign were usually yellow, but she would say that his original eyes were also yellow. Fast forward to when my cousins, siblings, and I were around 9 or 10, we were a little old to worry about supernatural shape-shifting strangers. A kid used to visit from the horse stables across the street, and to pass the time, we explored the woods behind my aunt and uncle's house. We managed to get really deep into the woods and found a turkey pen with a live turkey inside. Alone. The kid from the stables opened the pen and let my cousin's Labrador in. It happened in slow motion, but we watched the dog kill the turkey. And suddenly we felt like we were being watched. We ran back through the woods as fast as we could, panicking because, for the first time, the demons about the man had come home to roost. We sincerely believed that what had happened was that the man had set a trap for us and chased us through the forest back to my aunt's house. The kid from the stables went home, but the rest of us clambered back inside and told my aunt that we were being chased by the man. It did not help when my uncle said to my aunt, "Grab my shotgun." A few months later, we were told this was a man who lived in a shack in the woods, off one of the nearby main roads, and the neighbor kid from the stables had just killed a turkey that the man had been raising. We were never permitted to go that deep into the woods again. To this day, I am unsettled whenever I find signs of human occupation in the woods. Houses, abandoned campsites, shelters, certain trail markers, and trash from a homeless person. Story 115. Parents would go grocery shopping until very late a couple of times a week, and our house mysteriously had many problems with power outages. Also, it was strange that aunts and uncles used to send us nothing for birthdays and Christmas, and then suddenly we would receive gift cards to specific stores we liked. They were gambling money they could not afford to spend at casinos and then selectively not paying certain bills every month. They stole my sister's education fund left by her biological father, which she did not know existed until she was applying for university. They constantly stole cash from our Christmas and birthday cards sent by relatives and then swapped the cards into new envelopes so we would not know there was ever cash. I did not try fresh fruits like pineapple until adulthood because they did not want them to be wasted on us, as that was money that could be spent at the casino. Some people do not realize that gambling addictions can be as harmful as other addictions. Story 116. My mom told me that she could hear me roll my eyes. It was believable because she was blind in one eye, and her right eye was very weak, so she had amazing hearing. She could hear me mumble under my breath while I was in the back seat of our car. She would say, "You forget that because I can't see, my hearing makes up for it." Of course, I fully believed that she could hear my eyes roll. Story 117. I ate boogers as a child. My dad told me that boogers are actually poop. I did not want to eat poop, so I stopped eating boogers quickly. Story 118. Dragonflies sew your lips together so that you cannot eat, so you starve. I still kind of believe that. Story 119. My dad told me about Sigmund Freud and his ideas on incest when I was far too young. It really affected my ability to show affection for family members. I was terrified I might do something that would make them think I was sexually interested. Story 120. My dad told me that he caught a shark and dropped it in the lake where we were swimming. I think I was 6. Story 121. I was told a few things, but my parents told me that if I did not clean my ears properly, potatoes would grow out of them. I believed this for an embarrassingly long time. Story 122. Dad told me I was allergic to bacon because he did not want me to potentially take bacon away from him, as in telling Mum I like bacon, resulting in him having less bacon in the fridge. Not pork, just bacon. I did not mind much as I got older and went kosher, but I spent a decent portion of my life thinking I was allergic to bacon. I have a couple of actual real allergies. These allergies are near fatal, to the point that I will avoid establishments that may contain them on the chance there is cross-contamination. I understood that bacon was on the same level. Therefore, I spent the majority of my life avoiding almost every fast food place, restaurant, and cafe that served bacon, which is a lot of them. I did not have McDonald's until I was well into my teenage years and realized that I was not actually allergic to bacon. I did try bacon between finding out about the lack of allergy and going kosher, and I did not like it anyway. Story 123. My mother grew up without her mother because her mother died when she was only 4 years old. We often visited her maternal uncle. I remember asking my mother when I was little whether my grandmother had any other siblings, since I only knew that one uncle. She said no. Anyway, 20 years later, an old woman knocked on our door and told me she was my mother's aunt. I said, "My mother doesn't have any aunts, only uncles on both sides," and closed the door in her face. Then there was another knock on the door. Already annoyed, I opened it again. This time, my uncle stood next to the old lady. It turns out my mother often didn't really listen when I asked her questions, and she in fact had 3 aunts on her mother's side of the family. Story 124. Jammy Grammy Lammy Fuppa Berlin Stereo EO Leb Siep Nermonica, Lustrapec de Grespin de Crespin de Spespin de Vespin, de Whoop de Loop, de Brunkle Merry Christmas Lenore. Story 125. It is not the lie itself, but how I found out the truth. I still remember the exact moment my mother looked at me in a hotel pool in Cancun, Mexico, and said, "You do not still believe in the Easter Bunny, do you?" Story 126. When I was a kid, my grandmother would say she would take me to Disneyland or Disney World someday. She died a couple of years ago. I have still never been to Disneyland or Disney World, but she went over a dozen times, almost once a year from the time I was a kid to an adult. Don't worry, she was a horrible person who died alone, but that is a whole other difficult story. Story 127. Oh Lord, there are many of them. My father once told us that if we ever told anyone about my mother's abuse, he would lose his pension of 30 years with the city, causing us financial ruin and leaving us homeless. He also said that if we ever said anything, they would send us to the local high school where I would be raped every day behind the bleachers. My little brother was already experiencing that with me and every little girl my mother babysat over the last 13 years, which we never spoke about. Sometimes I wish he was not so dramatic and unhinged with his examples. It really affected my ability to judge what to take seriously and what to ignore because he exaggerated so much, even when I repeatedly asked if he was being serious. It took a while to rewire myself to reality and understand when he was just being ridiculous for shock value. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.